What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla Channel, the place where black men can freely express themselves. Straight up, no chaser. What's good, y'all? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla Channel. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the like button so I can continue to provide you with some good content and that I can stay motivated and stay positively impacted by your support. So what I want to do is I want to talk about an article that I ran across. It's an old article, but I think it's relevant to what is occurring today in relation to the politics surrounding black people's death. And I want to cover this article because it was presented to me by a Facebook friend. Shout out to Eon Graves. But this article is written by a woman by the name of Kimberly Foster. She is the founder and editor of a blog site named For Harriet. And if you want to reach her, you can reach her on Twitter at Kimberly N. Foster. I wouldn't suggest that you harass her at all. But if you want to reach her and to express your opinion and thoughts about what she said and the position and stance she is taking, you can feel free to do so. The name of her article is entitled, "Why I Will Not March for Eric Garner." I mean, you could substitute Eric Garner for Ahmaud Arbery, or for anybody else who's been subjected to extrajudicial killings by white vigilantes or by the police. Doesn't matter. You can substitute any black, just put a black man there, okay? So I want to go over this article, and I want to tell you why it's important. Somewhere at around the midpoint and at the end of the article, of course. But this is what she has to say. And this article was written in 2014. But it's still relevant, extremely relevant. And you'll see why as we move throughout this exercise. She says, and I quote, "I can't breathe. I held my breath as I watched Eric Garner's pleas for mercy. It didn't make it to the part where he suffocated, hands behind his back, face down on the sidewalk. The familiarity stings. I knew the ending. Images of murdered black men haunt my thoughts. When looking at Eric Garner's lifeless body, I don't have to imagine that he is my brother or my father to recognize the injustice of his suffering. My heart aches for the family he will never return to. And if the justice we speak of routinely is more than a figment of our imaginations, I pray it comes swiftly to Mr. Garner's family. But if the NYPD or the city of New York fail to act, I will not march for Eric Garner. I will not rally for him because I'm reserving my mental and emotional energy for the women, the black women no one will speak for." Wow. Wow. So she says, okay, I got some empathy, but I'm not going to do anything beyond that work. I'm going to look at the image, be taken aback by it, but when it comes to maneuvering politically, I have nothing left to give because I'm going to reserve my energy for women, black women. I'm going to work for my interest group. That's it. Now, I have problems with this on a larger level, on a theoretical level. For one, because I perceive the black community to be a body politic. And it's cool to focus on the various interests of different members of the community, because you got men, women, boys, girls. You got queer people. You got elderly people. You have class differentiations between people in the black community, educational differences, mental illness differences. So, I mean, you can focus on the various members of the community individually, but I believe in the idea of a body politic. And insofar as I regard the community as a body politic, I think that it is an abstraction to focus on the interest of one group and one group alone without at some point being able to tie the interest of the entire community back together again. That's just my view. Now, you might disagree with that. But at some point, we have to be able to tie our interest back to the collectives. And we have to be able to regard what we're jockeying for, justice. We have to perceive it as something more than just a zero-sum game. This is not like an NFL game, a playoff game. Somebody has to lose in order for somebody to win. That's not the situation that we're confronted with. And I'm tired of it being presented in that way. This is what happens when we put ideological blinders on for the sake of interest group politics or identity politics. It puts blinders on us. It makes us myopic. But I digress. And I'll get back to this point, though. I got to get back to it. So picking up where I left off. But if the NYPD or the city of New York fail to act, I will not march for Eric Garner. I will not rally for him because I'm reserving my mental and emotional energy for the women, the black women, no one will speak for. While the effectiveness of social media in spreading Garner's story heartens me, I could not refrain from comparing the empathy shown him, particularly by black men, to that which is heartbreakingly absent when black women attempt to discuss the everyday terrors we experience both in the world and at their hands. So for her, this is what she's doing. To me, this is virtue signaling and grandstanding. I'm going to tell you why. Because essentially what she's saying is black women extend empathy to black men, but black men extend no empathy whatsoever to black women. Black men are not outraged by extrajudicial killings that happen to black women. We're not concerned about rapes and murders that occur to black women. No, but you're going to see, like black men don't care about their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, and their nieces, and they don't run to defend them and stick up for them. And that black men don't defend women when they're in danger, quite generally speaking. I just think that that's erroneous. That's a misinterpretation of black men's reality. But I digress. Let me pick up. Watching black men show up for Garner after seeing so many derail conversations about black women's well-being leaves me with little more than a sinking feeling of despair upon recognition that the understanding so many of us crave will not come. So when it comes to issues related to black women, black men have no concern at all because black men try to derail the conversations. Because black men don't recognize and understand black women and what they feel and what they go through. So in other words, black men have empathy for themselves and what they're going through, but as it pertains to black women and their issues, we have no empathy at all. None at all. I think that this is just patently false. I mean, how else do you explain how recently a security guard was killed at a Family Dollar by two black men who were defending the honor of a black woman. How do you explain the phenomenon if there wasn't any empathy? There wasn't this overwhelming impetus to protect black women and to defend their honor. Now, you can dismiss the actions of these men as right or wrong, predicated upon your own personal proclivities related to protecting the honor of women. But that still doesn't belie the fact that these men must have had some empathy for this woman because they killed another man for the sake of that woman after what she considered to be an offense directed towards her. But I digress. She says, in recent weeks, black women have launched campaigns to ensure that we can exist in public without experiencing harassment, and have presidential endorsement of policy that addresses our specific needs. And though these petitions seem common sense to me, black women's mere desire to take up space is met with pushback. And then we're caught in a cycle of perpetually asserting our humanity. Your humanity? Are you making the case that black men do not perceive black women as human? Now look, let me just say this. What makes common sense to women in relation to policy may not make sense to men. Period. Take for instance, child support laws or family court policies related to custody. What makes sense to women may not make sense to men. It may not be fair to men. And to merely consent or agree with women when they want policies that advantage themselves doesn't necessarily mean that men are denying women's humanity. Take, for example, right now, the Me Too movement or Title IX policies on college campuses. These things are not advantageous to men, and they leave men vulnerable. So while we want to make sure that women aren't vulnerable, we don't want to create a condition in which men become vulnerable. Can't we create a condition that is optimal for both parties, that is fair for both men and women? Is that too much to ask for? But I digress. She says, these conversations do not only happen online. I myself have spent hours trying to explain to otherwise thoughtful, intelligent men why wearing a tight dress is not sending an invitation to harassment. I resign the conversations only when I know that no amount of empathetic gestures or desperate articulations will bridge the gap to comprehension. Now, let me just say this. There have been times in my life when I've looked at women as objects. I don't do it anymore. And I encourage you as a man, don't do it. I mean, if you're a heterosexual black man, it may be enticing for you to see a woman with a big old juicy, plump old, fat old ass walking down the block. And she might be parading and showing her ass off for all to see. Don't take the bait, bro. Have some respect for yourself. If that woman comes on to you, then you can. I at one point in my life, I was of such a mindset, I would talk to a woman anywhere. I didn't care if she was in church or a child care center. The supermarket, the mall, the library, wherever. Anywhere is fair game. Gas station, I don't care. I'm talking. She's got to tell me no. If she tells me no, I'm gone. I never ever Sat there and tried to plead my case. Well, you got a man, I got a man. Well, how long you had this problem? Well, you know, that don't mean nothing to me. I don't move like that. Never did move like that. Have some respect for yourselves. You're not entitled to a woman's affections. Just like a woman is not entitled to a man's affections. I'm the last dude, and I'm telling you guys, man, leave these women alone. If they don't want you to fuck with them, don't fuck with them. And you can tell by body language when a woman is open to you and she's trying to open herself up to you. Stop harassing these motherfuckers, man. Let me get back to the article. I found the will to dominate to be impenetrable to appeals for compassion. The will to dominate. That's an odd choice of words. The will to dominate to be impenetrable to appeals for compassion, as was painfully clear in the widely circulated video of Eric Garner's death. Too many fail to recognize that the violence, psychological, verbal, and physical, that we direct towards each other in communal spaces reflects the violence enacted upon our bodies and minds in larger dominating structures. Thus, there's an inability by many black men to acknowledge that black women, too, have a right to move through the world without fear. That a woman should not have to avert her eyes and quicken her pace when she encounters men in public spaces. Now, let me just say this, man. So recently I made a video about racism and sexism and how the two are not comparable. That they can't be used as analogies in order to understand one and the other interchangeably. Racism and sexism they don't work that way. Racism, I said in the video, to a much greater degree, is responsible for millions of deaths. Millions. And sexism might be responsible for deaths. It might be responsible for exploitation, might be responsible for harassment and uncomfortability, so on and so forth. But to equate the impact of the deaths of millions of people and the subjugation and exploitation of people predicated upon race to make it an equivalent to that of sexism, and sexism and vice versa, it's wrong. And I'm not trying to discount the horrors associated with sexism. I'm not. But to equate the two, that's a false equivalency. They're not the same. They don't work or operate the same. And I'm going to apologize to women for being afraid of men. Stop looking at these women like on the Bugs Bunny cartoon. You got these marooned and shipwrecked sailors who begin to, after a certain period of time, look at each other like hot dogs and hamburgers and shit. Stop doing that to women. Stop looking thirsty and crusty, man. So that they won't have this as an excuse in order to form alliances with us at some point in the future. And I'm not trying to condemn all men, but I'll be goddamn, I'm not going to make myself look like a buster running behind and chasing after a woman, man. I'm not doing that. And I hope you share the same sentiment. And if you don't share that sentiment, I hope you come to adopt it. Because there's nothing worse in the world than to see somebody trying to beg somebody to give them some attention. Let me get back into it. She says, we have been conditioned to believe the exploitation of black women's work to be a normal, expected part of our womanhood. Hold on, wait a minute. I missed one paragraph. Excuse me, I missed one paragraph. But we are told that unless we are murdered or raped, we are not truly in distress because black women's bodies are instruments upon which black men can play out their fantasies of domination without reprisal. But the illusion of power crumbles when black men face the police state. Right now, she's talking about the male gaze. I'm telling you, feminist politics has seeped into black politics. No question about it. No question about it. I'm looking up the male gaze to try to give you a reference to it. Who's the person who came up with this idea? Laura Mulvey is the one who coined the concept of the male gaze. It's no strange secret. There's been studies from psychologists, cognitive psychologists, that men become more aroused through visual stimuli. That's how men become sexually aroused. It's different for women. But one can argue it is just simply unreasonable for women to expect that men will not be attracted to them in any way, at any time. Now, I'm telling fellas, don't act on your attraction like stupid, crusty schoolboys. Thirsty and crusty schoolboys. Show some self-respect. Show some restraint. But I don't think that you can equate the death of someone, the loss of their life, to be the kind of action that is comparable to somebody looking at your ass or your rack, your tits. I don't think the two are the same as a matter of degree. But that's just my opinion. She says, black people, both men and women, experience coercive, violent, and often deadly interactions with law enforcement. Abuses of the badge draw immediate outrage. In these tragedies, even the men who regularly assault or excuse the assault of black women can see themselves, and their fear is most legitimate. So I have a problem with this. Let me unpack this. She says, even the men who regularly assault or excuse the assault of black women can see themselves, and their fear is most legitimate. Basically, she's saying that black women are assaulted by black men. And look, black women are assaulted by black men. This is truth. I'm not going to deny this. But the narrative, the script, the discourse she seems to be pushing forth is, to me, deception by omission. Because, let me tell you this, black women assault black men. Yeah, you got that right. Black women assault black men. Black women assault black boys. Black women rape men and boys, just like men do. Just as men rape black women and girls and sometimes molest boys, women do the same shit. So there's plenty of shit to be thrown around here. And instead of trying to focus on the ways in which we can mitigate the pathologies in our community, we're engaging in identity politics with blinders on, such that we can only advance the interests of our own groups, those whom we identify with based upon race, class, and gender. My question is, when are we going to move beyond this bullshit and try to actually tackle the problems and the phenomena? She says, we've been conditioned to believe the exploitation of black women's work to be normal and an expected part of womanhood. The exploitation of black women's work? What you mean, housework? You mean like care work? Like taking care of kids or what? Like what does she mean here? Fear of being deemed selfish compels us to act against self-interest. But that which is good for women is good for us all. Really? No-fault divorce laws are good for men just because they're good for women? Child support statutes and family custody statutes are good for men and women? See, this is what look, let me just say this. I'm telling you right now. Black feminists are painting themselves into an ideological corner. And they're preventing themselves, these ideological corners that they're painting themselves in, or standing in the way of them being able to form alliances with heterosexual black men. And the same goes for queer activists. They're painting themselves into ideological corners that are standing in the way of them being able to form contemporary alliances with heterosexual black men. And their inflexible commitment to patriarchy theory either conveniently conceals or it just outright ignores women's violence towards men and boys. Because it just reduces all the pathology in the world down to patriarchy. To me, this is either intellectually dishonest or it's just an epistemic blind spot on the behalf of these theorists. I mean, what are we going to do? Like use Marxian theory to paint the world as a dichotomy between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat? All you got to do is stick women into the proletariat position, men into the bourgeoisie position, and then you have an accurate assessment about how to order reality and social dynamics between men and women? This shit is, I can't believe that this is where we are. And this is the level of sophistication that we are using in order to try to mitigate the problems between men and women and the members of the body politic of the black community. But this is where we find ourselves. She says, I'm not settling for anything less than reciprocity. If you refuse to hear our calls for help, then I cannot respond to yours. I have no desire as a black woman to be placed on a pedestal. But I will not allow myself to become a footstool. Do not ask me for empathy if you are not content, or if you are content to deny it in return. So don't ask me for empathy if you're not going to give any to me. Many women continue to believe that offering unconditional support to men who dismiss their calls for help will result one day in a return of care. Let me read that shit again. Unconditional support to the men who dismiss their calls for help will result one day in a return of care. Like, you mean to tell me that black women as a whole are offering their unconditional support to black men? Like, are you fucking serious? Kimberly Foster, are you fucking being serious? Or do you mean to tell me you really actually believe that women as a whole, by and large, are offering their unconditional support to black men who are dismissing their calls for help? Black men ain't shit. Black men are trash. Fuck these niggas. These niggas need to pay my bills. If you don't pay my bills, then maybe we could chill. I don't think you do, so me and you are through. Niggas and flies, I despise. The more I see niggas, the more I like flies. That doesn't sound like unconditional support to me. It sounds like misandry to me. It sounds like misandry to me. Black misandry is what it sounds like to me. Many women continue to believe that offering unconditional support to the men who dismiss their calls for help will result one day in a return of care, as though they are a watering seed. But I have yet to see the fruit from that tree of hope, and I'm tired of waiting. So I will mourn Eric Garner, and I will cry bitter, broken tears for him, but that's all I can do. That's all I can do. So that's the end of the article, right? But ultimately, all I'm trying to draw out here is that there are many women who still hold these kind of opinions about black men. They feel like there's an equivalency between racism and sexism. So when we are the victims of racial oppression and we stand out in outrage against it, they feel like they should remain silent because they're subjected to harassment and abuse by men in virtue or in relation to the patriarchy. My viewpoint is this, and then I'm going to get out of here and end this video and to leave you to your own devices. United we stand, divided we fall. At the end of the day, we're going to have to find a way back to each other because I can tell you right now, you might not like what women are doing, but you got sisters and mothers and aunties and nieces. You got to fuck with them. There's no way you cannot fuck with black women. You got to fuck with them. You have to. You don't have to deal with white folks. There is a way for you to not have to deal with a white person at all. You can stay in the hood and not fuck with a white person, or if you do, keep them at arm's distance. Like you got the Heisman Trophy in your hand. You can stiff arm them. But you can't avoid interactions with the opposite sex. It's impossible. All I can say is, black women, black feminist women, we take umbrage with the assumption that because we're males, we're privileged and benefit from patriarchy. We take umbrage with that. We also take umbrage with your inflexible commitment to patriarchy theory. That might apply to white dudes, but it don't apply to black men. We want you to stop painting yourself into a corner, which is standing in your way of forming alliances with us. And that's all I got to say, man. Have a good day. Be peaceful and promote positivity. 1.